in the critical mineral space, they leverage knowledge such that Europe is petrified that China or Africa might not supply. The answer? Man-made alternatives. And man-made alternatives mean that some of the minerals we talk about here, as you know, diamonds are the first through the gateway with man-made. There's nothing that says they can't do it with other. The result is that all the mineral assets could potentially be redundant. Think about that.
As a strategist and a futuristic planner, I don't have a picture, and I keep, talking to my colleagues in industry. What is the picture that we have to develop the picture now and strive towards that picture? So I'm just wondering, from your perspective, are we with the good past? Are we looking at a very positive or very threatening future for our kids and our grandkids in terms of, and this also talks about we know that, in South Africa, the diamonds have also really almost depleted. We've got very few new sites, but apart from diamonds, we've got copper in Zambia, which, it has seen his heydays. As you comment about Botswana, as to really these assets, do we still have to bank on them still? Or are we still highly over-reliant on these endowments to our peril?
Yeah, so you've asked several questions. Let me take the first one, which is what of the future? So a fundamental sustainable development point of departure when dealing with minerals, oil and gas, is to think of them as finite. Let me put it as starkly as I can. The moment you take the first diamond, you are only going downhill. And yet, one after another, governments forget this. The only certainty with any mineral is that at some point it will end.
Empty,
How clearly can it be? Understood. And yet, governments mine minerals as if they are forever. So that is our, if you wish, shortcoming. Because we mine the diamonds as if they'll always be here. There is no sense of agency. There is no sense of anxiety about the future.
That's really my...
And yet from day one, the moment we recover the first carat, it was a minus, not a plus. So this is a terrible tragedy. And the way that countries or governments that understand this do is that they think of running the government of the day, financing it, but also taking enough to invest in those things that will replace the mine in terms of their ability to employ, pay tax, generate public income. Creating a state-owned entity called ODC doesn't do that, because the cake is the same diminishing cake.
You just take a pie and you're just doing this.
In effect, even if Debeers had no share in production, that would not stop from being depleted.
I got you. I got you.
So this should be our obsession.
Thank you.
And yet it isn't. This is a tragedy for us in a country where there is very little else to this. So how could it be done? Well, there are different ways. For one, we could have invested in other resources, not just in Botswana, outside. The other thing is that we could have invested in knowledge of mining, R&D technology, because we are moving into the digital space.
Absolutely.
Yeah. One of the advantages of us partnering with Debeers is that our partner has all the R&D capabilities in the geosciences,
the processing,
in the ore processing, in the engineering space, and in the sorting, valuing, and now synthetic detection.
Yep.
Look, it's if you are a scientist, if you go to these laboratories, and I'm not, you drool at what there is. I think our failing has been that when we have negotiated, we have focused on revenue. We should have, by now, embedded in the partnerships between the Debeers and our institutions, to be only contemplating it now, after 50 years, it's very late.
Very late in the hour.
And it's not just late in terms of time. It's late because Debeers isn't the giant she used to be and cannot invest any longer.
It's not the balance sheet that used to be.
Yeah, but we could have already built. So I think the inability to invest in these tangible potential sources of employment, sources of revenue, I think I think we sold ourselves a bit short. I'm not so sure that it cannot be done. I just know this. The Debeers that I joined in 1994 was a giant. The Anglo I worked for then was a giant.
Was a giant.
And yet, over time, they have had to close laboratories, because
those are investments,
they just could not justify the investment given the level of revenue. So I think in sustainable development terms, we have not succeeded in transferring the diamond wealth into areas that can replicate and generate revenue. In a very much more simplistic sense, statistically, Botswana is probably top, if not second, in the area of youth unemployment at something in the order of 40%.
Yep.
This is a ticking time bomb. Now, the good thing about diamonds, especially the small stones, is that they are cut manually. India has 800,000 jobs doing that. Now, if you think that we account for 26% of production, that's farming out jobs. And yet, in our wisdom, president after president, minister after minister, for 50 years, nobody have thought it worthwhile to just have a school to train
our people.
How obvious is obvious? It boggles the mind.
Some have just said we can't be competitive in that space.
Well, generally,
because of the law, they say it's a very low cost, India, what. And
so it is true that if you look at things as they are now, starting now, it would be a challenge. I find it hard to believe that with the right mindset, for 50 years, we couldn't crack it. Moderately crack it. Including perhaps negotiating with India and saying, okay, folks, what can we do to create a balance? Yeah. There are two types of people. Those, when confronted with a problem, think about why they cannot solve it. I prefer the fellow who says why I must solve it. Yeah. It is if we only embark on policy initiatives because they are easy, God help us. Who said we do it because it's easy? We do it because it is our livelihood.
Exactly.
We do it because our grandchildren need it. And we do whatever's necessary. Yeah. I cannot imagine, with the best will in the world, we couldn't crack it. Look, people have landed on the moon. People are landing on the planet Mars. We can't crack something like this.
We got a problem. Yeah.
So sure, maybe we couldn't. But if we couldn't, it's in the attitude. The attitude that starts with we can't do it ends up proving that we can't do it. Surprise, surprise. Yeah.
But it goes back to your comment earlier about centralized power. Centralized power meaning not necessarily just cabinet, but the few people that make a call for us. Because this one is very dear to me, R&D and technology, because I've been saying now, I remember I gave a speech at Botswana Engineers Society in 1998 that post diamonds, it's knowledge and technology, high value. Leverage our balance sheet and let's put our bet on that. Otherwise, we are facing death. I remember I even put a skull to say we're done. And we struggle to get audience, you know. I've talked to the relevant companies I've been doing strategy for over 23 years. Oh, Sheila, there are very few companies here that have got R&D departments, thinking departments. They even promised me that, yeah. And we go back 2 years and there's nothing.
Yeah.
I say, how can you run a multi-billion-dollar company without a thinking division? Exactly. You know, so I mean, you know, the statistics, and we shared that Africa only generates about 0.3% of R&D spent globally. And the statistics for patents and all that is also below 1 for all of them. So, and I'm saying this because I'm jealous, because I felt we could carry on leading. We could carry on, you know, like I said, looking at, and these tough decisions are made by people who dedicate their time to thinking every day, not a corporate leader who thinks he knows it and just says it.
Center of excellence mentality, where you have a breeding house of ideas and technologies. Yeah. So it is. It was very farsighted of you to see that the future was digital, when most people would not, myself included, have known. And yet here we are. Everything is digital. And yet here we are. African governments continue not to invest in knowledge. I was looking at a statistic in which Europe spends billions subsidizing European companies to crack the transition to clean energy technology. Sure, they have the money, but it speaks to the understanding fundamentally that the economies of the future leverage knowledge. And in the critical mineral space, they leverage knowledge such that Europe is petrified that China or Africa might not supply. The answer? Man-made alternatives. And man-made alternatives mean that some of the minerals we talk about here, as you know, diamonds are the first through the gateway with man-made. There's nothing that says they can't do it with other. The result is that all the mineral assets could potentially be redundant. Think about that.
That's a huge possibility.
It's not fast. I think it was the EU commissioner responsible for energy said something like, we didn't win the war just so we be beholden to China. We will find a solution where we don't need China.
And they're putting their money where their mouths are.
And they're putting their money. And this is, if for countries that are very dependent on minerals, it's a warning shot. There's still time, probably 50, whatever number of years. And yet, again, there isn't that sense of recognition, that sense of agency. Even if, let's say, you and I are wrong, that day will never come. we won't create these jobs unless there is groundswell of beneficiation, not just in diamonds, but in other minerals. The driver of that is technology. It is no coincidence that Japan and Korea are the center of mineral beneficiation with the whole world shipping. They have technology.
Yes, technology.
You want to beneficiate, is Japan and Korea and China you're going to have to do better than. Yeah. So where is that groundswell in SADC? At the African Union Commission, where men and women are saying, instead, the African Union Commission building is built by China, maintained by China from Beijing.
Yeah.
In 2010? What is this? Yeah. So there is a genuine sense of agency if things are going to change. There are a few sparks here and there, but it'll take more than a few sparks. Yeah, it'll take more than political rhetoric. Indeed, it'll take the citizens themselves from waking up and asking for those that govern to account.
Exactly, to account, yes, to account.
Your lead is only as good as you demand of them. Your work is only as good as you demand of them. And our leaders in the political sense are our workers. They work for us.
Yeah. We're supposed to serve us.
The less we demand, the less they deliver.
Yeah. Wonderful. I think so, Sheila, I think thank you very much. I think such an important topic. We could carry on and on.
Absolutely.
Because of the different facets. We didn't even talk about from a African perspective and global perspective and the renewable, but that's for next time.
Perhaps I should do that because we don't want to be China-centric.
Yeah, for lack of a better word, yeah.
So there are some countries on the continent from whom we could learn. Let me just take one example, and that would be Morocco.
Morocco, okay.
And because Morocco, in terms of phosphate, are de facto the Botswana of diamonds. Morocco accounts for 30% of the entire global phosphate.
Really? Wow.
In market terms, and the reserves are endless. And the state-owned company called OCP, it's a French word, so I won't trouble you with that.
Please.
It's exceptionally well managed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Same thing, PP arrangement or private or?
PP, but the company itself, unlike Debswan, is not a JP. This is a state-owned entity. I think there's a minority stockholder, but essentially it's a Moroccan company. And where Morocco has succeeded is first in not running the company down like most state-owned entities. It's exceptionally well managed. And there again, there's no political interest, but there is oversight. Yeah. The second thing is that Morocco phosphate is vertically integrated. And so the company not only mines, but has downstream operations in production of fertilizer.
Fertilizer, that's a big one, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And not only that, they are now penetrating Africa. No longer just selling phosphate, but selling fertilizer to the rest of the world.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it has been done. But it requires a clarity of purpose and a long-term view. Now, to be fair, Morocco has the advantage as a kingdom. People don't, there's no much election.
Yes, like UAE and Dubai, when they decide on something.
Right, that's it. But look, cowboys don't cry. We said we wanted democracy. We have it now.
You can't have
just got to make it work.
Have your cake and eat it. Yeah. So Morocco, that model works, or has worked very well for the Moroccan people.
For revenue, for employment, for value addition. OCP is an ideal model for achieving this.
When we are talking about Africa, there is another aspect of, which I picked up from one of our podcasts, we talked about the corridors, that we are treating Africa as if it's pockets of 56 countries. when you've got all these belts of rich natural resources, that it goes back to AU, where we could be looking at them from saying, if we do diamonds, has South Africa got something that can augment and help us to add value? We've got copper belt on the western side now. Zambia's got copper. DRC's got copper. There's a lot of debate about smelting and processing of copper. Is there a vision around that with your African travels?
Yeah, no, the short answer there isn't. So you ask questions that are very important but very complex because they are layered.
Yeah.
So first, to reference to my statements, basically what I was saying is, it is true that physically and geographically you have a body called Africa. Yeah. But there it ends. You don't have a jurisdiction called Africa.
Correct.
And yet all of us talk about Africa as if there's a government you can go to.
That's true. Yeah. That's true.
The AU, unlike the EU, is not a body that legislates. It's a body that speaks to aspirations, but it has no power, no legal power over any of the 53 countries. By contrast, when the EU Parliament makes a law, it applies en masse and supersedes, right? This is important because then they have the power, and they are in the language of the trade. They are legally competent. The African Union is not legally competent. So that's a mistake. The assumption problems are going to be solved in Addis. Forget that.
That's not going to happen.
And yet, for 60 years, we talk as if they can.
We all Agenda 2063, things are going to happen.
Right. So there are two falsehoods. The presumption that just because we are physically one entity,
together, we're sitting on the same piece
economically and otherwise we are. The second is that because we have this club of heads of states where they aspire and debate, but somehow there is legally something tangible you can engage. There isn't. Yeah. That's why NEPAD didn't work. That's why the Africa Mining Vision didn't work. That's why the trade thing won't work. And so forth and so forth and so forth. Voila. So let's just be clear. Now, what I was envisioning was that if you look at Africa geologically in terms of minerals, actually geology is more coherent. And you have deposits of certain type clustered around certain geographic footprints.
Not caring about the lines on top of them.
No, not caring. They were much clever. Yeah. So if you look to the south, you've got diamonds from the DRC downwards and platinum. If you look in the belly of Africa, you have copper. And if you go to the west, you have gold all the way to Tanzania and Ethiopia. And if you go even further, the west of the Sahel, then you have the largest explored iron ore deposit of an order of magnitude of 60% content relative.
Really? Is that the Guineas?
Yes, relative to Australia's 30%.
Really? Wow.
Think about that. And what I'm advocating is, think not of yourself as Africans, but as the gold belt. And say, we, the countries in this cluster, will come together and we will have our own agreement. And we will have the same value proposition to all investors. And we will ask them to come in the understanding that they only have to negotiate with one of us. And we can then have the critical mass to beneficiate when necessary.
A lot of these economies are still very much dependent on these resources. Am I right?
Yes, but
your Botswana, your DRC, your Angola, Nigeria, with the oil and gas, Nigeria,
gas,
and all that. I'm just struggling to finish on a bad note. So I'm trying to spin some positivity out of this. What is it? Just to throw it back.
Well,
what's encouraging in terms of development around this matter?
Maybe the young generation, and I can't, we said a parent is only as good as the child and vice versa. We said a leader is only as good as the people hold them to account. On the area of accountability and knowledge, two things may save the future generation. it is the digital connectivity. You can't ring fence. So my podcast, for instance, young people in Kenya and Ghana wrote me and said, we are going to COP28. May we use your materials? And I said, that's what it's meant for.
Yeah.
Go ahead and use it.
Yeah.
So first, information is available readily. And information is democratizing the way we live.
Correct.
Yeah. Information is empowering young people to demand and ask the right questions. My sense is that it may increasingly become difficult for those who govern badly to do so. I really think that the advent of social entrepreneurship also is taking food and taking hold. And I think that when I project and say, what do I see in this future generation? I see a generation that cannot be duped easily. I see a generation that will ask questions. I see a generation that is connected across frontiers, not just in Africa, but in the rest of the world.
Yes.
I therefore see a groundswell of public voice. And I think in the area of natural resource management, the role of policy, governance and sustainable development, nothing is going to tip the scale more than an informed public voice.
Yeah, that's very important. And coming home to Botswana, one of the things that was really shocking me about 20 years ago was how much people did not know diamonds, anything about diamonds. But in the advent of digitization, I see that now more and more people are becoming quite aware and educated on the role and what it is. And what it can do, and the finiteness, and that's a really good thing.
It's a very, very good thing. To the extent we can do what we do and inform, the better. I do have to finish by thanking people. So you said earlier you had butterflies when you thought about going into social media. So did I. But I told myself, if not you, who else? You have to bite this bullet. But to be fair, I'm not the most knowledgeable person on these. There are many men and women in our country. And I would be failing in my duty if I didn't thank them. Many of them are my sources of fact-checking.
Okay.
Many of them are my sources of saying, go to so-and-so, I don't know. So the fact that people aren't visible doesn't mean they are not doing. This I can testify to.
And you acknowledge them.
Yes, because without them, I wouldn't have the confidence that my facts are right. And some take the time to read, first check, call and say, look, I don't know this, but it doesn't sound right. Let me call Joe. Joe will know.
Beautiful.
It's a mark of generosity in the extreme. And so it's important people know I don't walk alone.
That you have know everything.
No.
You are being fed by others.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much, Angela. I really appreciate your time, making time for this. I really hope that the viewers out there appreciated these insights around this critical resource for Botswana, for Africa, the other aspirations that we have as a country. And this is where we end. Thank you very much and see you at the next episode. Thank you and bye.